Hello, apes, and welcome to screencast number 10 on Chapter 3. Wow, long chapter. So, Chapter 3, we're looking at evolution, biodiversity, and population ecology, and we've been talking about population, numbers, and density. And now we're going to talk about species that are called K-selected species and R-selected species so that we understand what they mean in terms of the models and how we can look at populations and how they grow. So one of the things that we need to consider is something that is referred to as the biotic potential. And of course, biotic means living. So this is the living potential that we have. This is an organism's capacity to produce offspring. That's what its biotic potential is. So we have some species that are referred to as K-selected species. And a K-selected species is a species that has a considerable amount of energy. They take a long time to gestate and raise their young. There are resources that they have that are devoted to caring for the young, and they protect them and they help these offspring. They usually have a few offspring rather than lots of offspring at a time because there's a greater chance for survival of the few offspring. So these species are considered to be K-selected because their populations tend to stabilize over time near the carrying capacity. So we identify carrying capacity as K. That is our abbreviation for this. So their populations stay close to carrying capacity. The organisms must compete to hold their own in a very crowded world, and they rely on the natural selection, which favors investing in the high quality offspring that are going to be good competitors. So can you think of some species that you might think of that are K-selected species? One of the ones I think of are like bear, even deer may fall under that category. Okay, because they have one or two cubs or one or two deer. They don't have 10 like dogs or cats, 15. They don't have 100 like some other species would. So our selected species, they're on the other side. They have high biotic potential. They devote their energy and resources to producing many offspring in a short period of time. Mice, rabbits, okay, are examples of this. Their offspring do not require any sort of parental care after birth. So the R strategists simply leave their survival to chance. So the sea turtles that will lay the eggs on the shore, hundreds of eggs they'll lay at a time, then they'll leave, and the baby turtles will hatch, and then they have to travel across the sand to get to the water in order to be able to survive. That would be an example of this. So the R actually denotes the numbers per capita. Now, a lot of times students will confuse per capita, and it's really simple. Per capita means per individual. So this is the rate at which the population increases in the absence of any limiting factors. And our selected species are going to fluctuate greatly because they operate often well below the carrying capacity. So these are two major extremes that we're talking about, and most species fall somewhere in between this. So humans, where are we with this? Humans are actually developing land at an exponential rate. They're extracting resources at an exponential rate. their population is growing at an exponential rate, and they're increasing the rate of environmental change for other species. So we're the major problem when it comes to sustaining that biodiversity. Science has helped us understand how we are changing the environment if we listen to the scientists, and there are a group of people that don't want to listen to the scientists. We see the impacts, the threats that we're putting on biodiversity, and it's actually creating very complex social and economic and political problems as well. Uh, we see right now in our current administration that there's great conflict where they went against the Paris Treaty or the Paris Protocol that was developed, and we're seeing a president that doesn't think that the natural resources are being depleted, and we have to worry. And the head of the EPA thinks global climate change is just fine. So there is that group. But we're also, when we actually take a look at the science behind it, there are social and economic problems that we'll be talking about throughout the year. And we've got to understand these factors in order to be able to solve the problems. And we have to understand these factors in order to be able to make informed decisions, to vote, and to be able to live sustainably and reduce that global footprint that we have. We've got to be careful about introducing species in an area because that poses huge problems when you bring in new species. They really thrive in their new environments, but they eliminate native species. And we're seeing that problem with oysters in the Chesapeake Bay. One, we've over-harvested them, but now we have other species and other conditions that are not allowing them to come back like they should. Native island species are particularly vulnerable because islands are really isolated. They evolve in the isolation. They have limited need for defenses because most islands don't have major predators on them. And biologists and land managers, they often must eradicate the introduced species that come in just to protect the native habitat so that they're not destroyed. We started talking about Hawaii, and pigs are being hunted, and pig-free areas are being fenced off because these wild pigs are just growing and increasing at a rate that is damaging native species within that area. Scientists and land managers and private citizens together are trying to protect the native species habitats of Hawaii. They're trying to prevent invasive species and they're removing them when they can. They're trying to reintroduce native species like the nene that we talked about and protecting them and expanding their population. They're using ranch land that is being restored to forest, and they're really looking at trying to protect the coral reef communities because they really protect the islands from different biological factors like the tsunamis and disasters like that. And we're trying to protect the marine reserve for the world because that again, they are major resources in helping to keep the waters clean and control our climate. There's areas that are being restored and protected, and the land has resulted in something called ecotourism. Our trip to Costa Rica was an ecotourism, so we got to really understand the value of the resources of the rainforest and see how the rainforest was being put back in Costa Rica. Rainforests are amazing. The phenomenon of people visiting islands to experience these natural areas is resulting in ecotourism. We also have to be aware of the climate change, and that is altering how we protect our species and our habitats because we are changing. The temperature is changing, it's going up, and species that were adapted to certain temperatures aren't able to live in the warmer temperatures. As a result, we're seeing, like the Canadian geese, that they're staying in this area because the climate is just right for them. They don't have to worry about the cold anymore. So land is typically protected to conserve the species that live there. And as the climate changes, we need to protect the land so that we can have the species surviving. So here is a geothermal map that shows Hakalau, which is part of the Hawaiian Island area, and you can see in this the temperatures, how they were before. This is a malaria-free area, and then when we can see when the temperatures go up, it's going to encompass a whole broader area. Notice how this line has changed. The line is moving up with this because of global warming. So good. Chapter 10, the last one we get to conclude. So what did we learn? We learned that the fundamentals of evolution and population ecology are an integral environmental part to environmental science. We know that natural selection and speciation extinction help determine our biodiversity of species from, as I said, the microscopic to the macroscopic, plants to animals. We understand how ecological processes function at the population level and how that is so crucial in protecting biodiversity. Okay, the end. We can put this chapter to rest. That means another test. See you on the other side.